What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of TableSetters, covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, joined with my tag team partner, Devin. What's going on, man?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 105. We are here to talk mainly tonight about the hottest team in Major League Baseball right now.
So no warming up at the bullpen. We got a great guest today on TableSetters. Brady Farkas, host of the Refuse to Lose Mariners podcast, and recently a writer for the Roundtable Sports. Brady last joined us back in November of 2024 on episode 39 before the season began, fresh off of 2024's campaign. And now he's back as the Mariners ride their most dramatic stretch. It's got to be years. We're going to talk about Cal Raleigh's historic home run tear, Josh Naylor's instant impact to Seattle's push to their first ALS crown, potentially since 2001. But Brady, how you doing, man? Welcome back to the show.
I'm doing well. Episode 39. Now we're in the hundreds. You guys have grown a ton this year. It's been fun to follow from afar and happy to be back.
We're glad to have you back. I think only our second two-time guest. So even though we have over 100 episodes here, we only have a few people that have been on here multiple times. So happy to have you back. We're going to jump right into it here. There's lots to talk about. We're not going to bury the lead. Cal Raleigh, we're going to start right there, has now passed Mickey Mantle for the most home runs in a single season by a switch hitter and tied Ken Griffey Jr.'s Mariners franchise record with 56 home runs. He's also smashed the catcher home run record. Positioned himself firmly in the top two of the MVP conversation, obviously. How historic in your eyes is this season? And when you balance the power numbers with his defensive responsibilities, working with the pitching staff, the leadership, what does that mean in your mind for his MVP case right now against the prolific Aaron Judge?
Couple of different questions there in one. First off, I think it's incredibly historic in that, as you said, like we've never seen this stuff before. And not only is he passing guys, he's passing inner circle guys, like inner circle Hall of Famers, like 1%ers he is passing when you talk about Mickey Mantle, when you talk about Ken Griffey Jr., when you talk about what he's doing in this era, it is so impressive to me. I understand that the homer is in vogue now as part of the three true outcomes, but it's never been harder to hit than it is right now, given how good the pitching staffs are, given how good the game plans are, how good the video is, how the pitchers go max effort all the times, and there's so many of them. It used to be, right, you get a guy to the seventh inning, you could wear him out, and you hit him out, you take him deep on pitch 110. This isn't like that anymore. I mean, so he has made himself a much more complete hitter right now, right? Like we're talking 30 plus home runs from the left side, 20 plus home runs from the right side to be able, I mean, his right-handed home run total would be the top of many teams' catcher list this year. So we've never seen it. It's incredibly impressive. And I personally don't get too wrapped up in the MVP discussion. I know a lot of people do. It doesn't matter to me all that much. I will say this. The thing that if I was picking Cal over Judge, I would go with availability. I know that Judge didn't miss much time with the arm injury, and I know he's going to end the year, at 145 games played or whatever, but Cal's going to end this year like 160 games played. To do that and be in there every single day and to do it at the catcher position and do it mostly at the catcher position rather than the DH spot, it has been unbelievable. And if you take the word value and look at MVP for what it actually says, value, I think it's hard to dispute how valuable Cal Raleigh is to this team because, look, they dealt in the first half of the season without Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, and Bryce Miller for a large portion of the first half. Cal Raleigh kept them afloat. They dealt with Julio Rodriguez going through his Julio first half that he has every year, and Cal Raleigh kept them afloat. They are not in this position without him, and there is no debating that.
So do you think there's an East Coast bias that adds a couple points to Judge's case? We've talked about it with Ohtani, where it feels like he is the forefront favorite because of the fact you play in a market like New York or LA. Is there a bias that writers have to get over for the Judge thing that Cal's, and I know that you said the MVP thing doesn't mean that much to you, but if Raleigh was to realistically do that, does he have to do something even more extra to get past where Judge is in the beginning of this year?
I think that do I think there's an East Coast bias? I think that it's kind of a fine line where you're so used to being in the conversation that you're kind of like grandfathered into being in the conversation. But then there does become a point where it gets so oversaturated of you that now the standard for you becomes that much higher. Right. So like we're so used to having Judge in the mix that I think he's inherently in the mix anytime he's doing something special. But if he were to have won it 4 or 5 times, like eventually I think the bar would get so high for him that we would start looking for other people. I don't think we're quite at that spot yet, but I think that I think he's pretty close to those numbers. Like the batting average stuff is going to weigh him down because Judge is going to hit, 70 points higher than him. But he's already got the catcher record. He's got the switch hitter record. He's one away from having the Mariners record. And if he gets to 60, that is certainly a big number. And if he were to get to 63 to pass Judge and have the all-time American League record, that would be 7 more in 6+ games. That would be hard to get. But if he got that, that would be incredibly hard to argue with. So he has already hit, I think, a number of the checkpoints. 57 to pass Griffey is next. 60 is better. 63 would be even better.
So we talk about the value, and really just as valuable as Cal was from the whole season. Josh Naylor has been a revelation since the late July trade from Arizona. In just 44 games played, he's produced 1.5 F/WAR. Look at the slash line: 8 home runs, 26 RBIs, the perfect 16 for 16 in stolen bases. Free agency is looming for him, and projections range from 3 years, $52.5 million, 4 years, $80 million. How do you evaluate his long-term fit in Seattle? And really, given the comps to, I would say, the Rhys Hoskins deal, what kind of contract do you think it will actually take to keep him in Seattle long-term?
I think he's a great fit. I think the Mariners can bring him back. And we end up in the same spot as we do every year, where we look at it and say, well, hey, if the Mariners wanted to do X, Y, or Z, they could, and they end up not wanting to do X, Y, or Z. Now, the thing we have to look at is you go into this offseason, you say, hey, Polanco's going to opt out. He's been so good that he's going to opt out. So there's money that is now available. They're going to lose Gino off the books. They're going to Mitch Garver's deal, 2 years for $24 million, is off the books. Mitch Haniger, who they're paying to not be there, he is coming off the books. So there is money coming off the books. Now, some of that's going to be balanced by arbitration raises, and some of the, Julio's deal kicks to another level and Cal's extension kicks to another level. So there are, some of those savings are offset by things that are naturally going to rise. That said, they can't afford Josh Naylor. I think Josh Naylor should be priority 1 for this team right now. Not just because he's been so good and not just because he's a fan favorite, but because positionally he is by far the cleanest fit that they have right now. Like, they don't have a first baseman waiting in the minor leagues to come here. They do not have a first baseman. The guy they had was Tyler Locklear, and they traded him in the deal to go get Gino. So they need a first baseman no matter how you slice this thing. So it's an easy positional fit. It's a far easier fit than bringing back Polanco, who's been so good even. But so he's 28 years old. He's the youngest of those 3 guys that they have. He has certainly shown a great baseball IQ, good clubhouse presence. The fans have resonated with him. He's resonated with the fans. Money-wise, 3 for 52 sounds certainly fair. If it was 3 and an option, I would want it. If it was 4 and if it was 4, I would want it. Again, 28, good defensively, good baseball IQ, and a guy who, look, you got to pay the T-Mobile tax. A guy who says he's not afraid to hit in Seattle and actually enjoys hitting in Seattle, because all the other guys they've tried to get in the past haven't wanted to hit in Seattle. He actually seems to like it, and he's not afraid to tell you it and maybe punt some of the leverage he would have in that regard.
Yeah, that seems so important. I know, talking to you back in November, you had mentioned, we kind of closed the episode asking you, like, what are your biggest hopes and wishes for Seattle going forward? And one of the answers, I listened back to it just yesterday, knowing that you were coming on, and you said something along the lines of, like, you're hoping Seattle can become a destination for players. Like, players aren't afraid to come there. So with that in our minds, like Josh Naylor, knowing all of what you just said, it seems so important that they do the right thing and try to lock him up there. I mean, he seems, you said it, the obvious fit going forward at first base. But going back to that, do you think, I mean, they're aggressive at the deadline. Are you feeling a little more like they're trending in that direction of becoming a destination of a perennial winner? Or are you still kind of waiting and seeing there?
There's 2 things that guys will resonate with. One is, can we win? And two is, can we get paid? And if you're not doing either of those two things, you have a really hard time landing players. So if the Mariners were to come out and win or make a very deep run, that would instantly help. I don't think that the money, I think that the word is out that the money is not going to be tops in Seattle. So they're going to have to go out and win in order to attract some of these guys. I think they've proven that this front office is aggressive at the deadline and they are willing to take on some money in season, which is nice. But I think the players who are free agents that we're talking about, they're free agents in the offseason. They care about what you're doing in the offseason. And so I don't think that they are that destination yet. I think if they win, then they certainly have the ability to become that this offseason, but then that would be a window you'd have to capitalize on.
Let's talk about the rotation here a little bit. I mean, well publicized for the last few years, how just the potential dominance of 1 through 5 there in Seattle, well documented. You had mentioned to us last year how remarkably healthy the starting rotation was last year, and kind of alluding to that there's no way that can happen every single year. Sure enough, George Kirby, Bryce Miller deal with some injury issues this year, but overall, those 5 guys still had a huge impact. The rotation steadied itself in September. Bryan Woo's length has been, I think, in most people's opinion, the difference maker there. 20 quality starts, 3.02 ERA, and his ability to set up a bullpen that interestingly owns a 1.82 ERA in games following his outings. If the postseason begins tomorrow, if it's you, who gets the ball in game 1 for the Mariners? Woo, Gilbert, Kirby, Luis Castillo. Who are we looking at?
Absolutely Bryan Woo. Unquestionably to me for several reasons. One, he's been the best pitcher on their staff, and he's been the best pitcher on their staff all year. Two, he is the most efficient pitcher that they have. So when you talk about kind of setting up the rest of the series, also, I trust that he's going 6 or going 7. And he's going to be able to not only pitch well, but eat up innings while doing it. Other guys they have might be able to grind you through 5 shutout innings, but now the bullpen is kind of hindered moving forward. So Bryan Woo is game 1 to me if I have my complete ability to set it in my favor. And we don't necessarily know that that will be the case, but Bryan Woo would be my choice unequivocally in game 1.
So you mentioned that Julio first half swoon, and obviously you're happy with what the season has evened out to be. He has had a solid second half, but I think locally here, we're watching from afar here in New York, but it seems like he's gotten a lot of flack from the outside for struggling to put it together earlier in the season, that this has become a trend. Give us your overall thoughts of Julio's full package this campaign, because like we said, he's become a big piece to what they're doing. He's realized exactly who he is. He's gotten more comfortable at the plate. What are your thoughts about Julio Rodriguez and who he is as a player right now as we sit September of 2025?
I mean, he's a phenomenal player. And when you look at the whole body of work, he's got a chance to go 30-30 this year. And I mean, that's a limited list of guys who have done 30-30, a couple of times, twice, I think it would be by the time you're 24 years old. Like, I mean, we're talking, he's going to get MVP votes. He's not going to win it, but he's going to get down ballot MVP votes. It is a special year, and he's special defensively as well. So when you look at the full body of work, it's going to look great. And it is great. The thing that frustrates about Julio, or that is frustrating about Julio, is you see what he can do in these 2-month spurts, and you then wish that it would happen in a 6-month time frame, right? We all want him to be Acuna from 2023, where you go 40-70 and you hit 335 doing it. Like, that is, the potential is there for that kind of impact, but we just haven't seen it long enough over the course of a season. The thing that about Julio that is, I think, the most frustrating is not the right word. The thing you have to notice is that he was too slow to make proper adjustments, I think, in the first half of the season, right? Like, and I understand it. It's a fine line. You don't want to change everything too quickly, but you don't want to change nothing either. The approach for Julio has been much, much better in the second half of the season. He's never going to be a guy who walks a ton, right? Like, he is a swing-happy player. But at the beginning of the year, he was... So let me back up, not to get too long-winded, but I think Julio came into this year with a conscious plan that he wanted to cut down strikeouts. I think that was very, very apparent. He wanted to strike out less, put the ball in play more. So as a result, he started swinging at everything early in the count. And he wasn't striking out that much, but he was also swinging at the slider 6 inches off the plate and grounding out. And he was swinging at the fastball that would almost hit him in the fists and rolling over to third base. So again, he wasn't striking out, which was his goal, but it was coming at the expense of hard contact, that loud contact. In the second half, he's been much more diligent. He's not going to be a walker very often, but he's seeing more pitches and therefore getting better pitches to hit, getting ahead in the count more, and giving the pitcher more of a chance to make mistakes. We are seeing more 2-1 counts, 3-1 counts, opportunities where you can do damage rather than letting the pitcher dictate terms, because the entire first half of the season was a whole lot of I'm getting myself out, and that hasn't happened as much here.
It is, like you mentioned, it is such a fine line when you make an adjustment in the game of baseball. We talked about this just yesterday when we recorded another episode. We mentioned Ellie De La Cruz, who it's become well publicized in the last few days. He has 1 home run in his last, I think now 73 games.
Wow.
And another guy who I think little by little has tried to cut down the strikeout rate and has succeeded year by year. But now you wonder, has that come at the expense of barrel rate, hard hit percentage, home run power, all that kind of stuff? And I think the answer is an astounding yes. And maybe that holds the Reds back from the playoffs this year. And we'll see what adjustments he makes next year. Just like Julio, super young guy. I got to ask you as a quick aside here. This is kind of another topic, but before we get too far in the big league club, the MLB draft.
Yeah.
I think the beginning of it shocked everybody. How fired up were you as a Mariners fan to see Cade Anderson available for you guys to pick, with the other teams letting him go?
It's so exciting for fans on a couple of different fronts, right? And I don't claim to be the prospect guru, and I'm certainly not the draft guru. So I think for many people like me, it's fun to see a guy that you've heard of, first and foremost, right? A guy that you actually know, and a guy who you can point to the resume and say, okay, I know that guy played at LSU, and I know that guy won the College World Series. And oh, by the way, I just watched that guy throw a complete game in the College World Series, and I just watched it a week and a half earlier. I think that gets fans fired up, because we're not talking about a 17-year-old who's 6 years away. We're talking about a guy who we know, who has a resume we can point to, who has a track record of success, and all indications are that this guy is going to be ready soon. And while I think that all fans would like their minor league programs to be good, because it eventually means your major league program would be good, we all care ultimately about our major league program being good as quickly as possible. And having a guy in Cade Anderson who can come up maybe as early as next year helps the Mariners kind of sustain this window. And then kind of on the macro, what has been the biggest fear about the Mariners kind of all along for years is that they don't spend a lot of money, and they're not going to be able to pay everybody. So when you look at it and you say, okay, Logan Gilbert's a free agent after 2027, and George Kirby's a free agent after 2028, and then there's Bryan Woo and Bryce Miller, who I think it's after 2029. You're like, okay, are they going to lose these guys in free agency? Are they going to trade them to offset some things? Well, now you have this ready-made pitcher who we've heard of that is going to be up quickly, that if they are forced or decide to go in those directions with some of their current big league roster, you have a guy that might be able to come in and fill in one of those spots admirably and quickly.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely was exciting to see. And Devin and I first started talking about the NCAA scope of things this season following the draft, and it was really cool to see it fall into place and how chaotic it really was. Well, let's discuss the bullpen here. Edward Bizzardo has quietly thrown 73 plus innings out of the pen, 2.45 ERA, 180 opponent average. You know the numbers here, but he's become a glue piece in Seattle's bullpen, desperately they needed. And since joining the team, Luke Jackson has carved out a role with riding the four-seam fastball, 174 opponent average in the slider mix. If you're Dan Wilson, who do you see as the three arms that he's going to trust most come October, God willing, that they get to a postseason series? And what roles do you envision for each of these guys?
Not even a question. Not even a question. Andres Munoz is 1, Matt Brash is 2, and Gabe Spire is 3. Those are the 3. And those 3, if they could pitch every single playoff game, if your starter could go 6 and those guys could go 7, 8, 9, that would be the plan every time out. Bizzardo is 4th. He's next. He's been excellent. Now, started out in a lot of low leverage opportunities and just kept working his way up. And he's become a valuable guy to get out of 6th and 7th inning jams. He's pitched the 8th at times, and he's really been huge because guys they were counting on, like Gregory Santos and Troy Taylor, really have not been part of this thing at all this season. So Bizzardo has really filled in a void, and he certainly is 4th, but he's been a huge 4th here. So Bizzardo's been great. Luke Jackson, more of a fringe guy, a recent pickup. I would be surprised if he even makes the postseason roster should the Mariners get there. It would depend on how they want to do the rotation. Are we talking about a 5-game series or a 7-game series or a 3-game series, right? If I don't need as many starters here, then I can bring more bullpen guys. If I need a 4th starter, then I have one less bullpen. So I would say it's less likely he makes the team, but in a 3-game series would be possible if you're going to bump, 2 starters out of the mix off the roster.
For Munoz, obviously been fantastic. I remember that moment in the Bronx, a little bit of a hiccup where
I was
the Yankees were. Oh yeah, I remember you tweeting about it.
There.
He gets beat up, and I guess he's tipping a little bit. And the Yankees now have become known for just like having no shame in relaying pitches that they're picking up, which is completely allowed. They're just a little more brash about it than other teams, apparently. Is that completely put to bed for Munoz? Is that an issue that they feel like could creep back up, or do we think it's fixed?
Yeah, I think the tipping is done. I don't think they're worried about that. The bigger issue for Andres Munoz is, like it is for many relievers, and I've heard the comparison, and I forget which one of you is a Met fan, but all right. So he's got a little bit of the Edwin Diaz in him, right? Where like the stuff is electric, and on any given day, he can strike out the side on 11 pitches. And on any given day, he can walk the leadoff guy and hit the next guy and be and put himself in and out of traffic. So it's a little less pronounced than Diaz is, but he's certainly ridden the tightrope a lot more often in the second half. Now, because he hasn't blown saves, it doesn't really get talked about. But if you go and look at the numbers, and I don't have them in my head anymore, at one point, it was like he had a walk in like 8 of 11 appearances in the second half at one point. And again, you're flirting with disaster when you do that. And he keeps getting around it, but at some point you're not going to be able to get around it, especially against good lineups. So Munoz is excellent. I wouldn't be worried about the pitch tipping. I would be worried about, the control going in and out, and the slider is not as hard as it was. Like I remember 2 years ago or so, we made this big effort to get the slider sharper and tighter, and it was 87 miles an hour. It's got a little bit more of a loop to it now, and while it still moves a lot, it's 84, 85. And 84, 85 with a hump is a lot different than 87 that, has a sharp late break to it. So if you're asking me to nitpick what's been a great season, it would be those two things for Munoz.
Speaking of my team, the Mets, and your team, the Mariners, they met up in the Little League Classic, which I love. And there was a lot of news made off the field by Rob Manfred during that series where he casually mentioned the idea of realignment. Now, for someone who covers the Mariners, I think this is very interesting to talk about. You and others have brought up how the travel that Seattle has to go through with their location is a bit of a disadvantage, no matter how you look at it. It just is. So the idea of realignment and maybe cutting down on the travel, is that something that you would be a fan of?
From a Mariners perspective only, realignment needed to happen yesterday. And the Mariners are at a competitive disadvantage. And I don't want to be the excuse guy, and I don't want to be that. We've seen the Dodgers win the World Series last year. They travel a lot also. And it's also not like these guys are traveling, they're not sitting out there at gate B3 getting middle seats, and traveling in discomfort. So I recognize all of that. But they are at a competitive disadvantage when you look at this. And I was a big fan of the balanced schedule starting in 2023. And I was a big fan of, Bryce Harper coming to Seattle every other year and seeing Shohei every other year with the Dodgers. I think that is great for fans, and I think that is great for baseball. What I don't love about it is that the travel has become even more of a bear than it was before. Because if you look at it now, the Mariners have had 3 separate 9-game plus road trips to the East Coast. 3 separate road trips of that length. Earlier in the year, it was Cincinnati, Toronto, and Boston. Then we go into August in the dog days, and it's that trip you're referring to. It was the Orioles, the Mets, and the Phillies, and Williamsport with no off day. So it's 9 games in 9 days in 4 cities, and they go 2-7 in that stretch. Then they come back east a week and a half later to go 3-6 on a road trip where it's, I forget who was first, but then Atlanta or Tampa and then Atlanta. And it's just and so those road trips are happening far more often as you've got to go to Atlanta every other year and Philly every other year and Cincy every other year. In addition to taking on the East Coast American League teams, they're going to go to Miami next year, and that's going to be tough. So it is hard. And you look at it, the Dodgers and Padres, I think, will have traveled more miles this year. Part of that is because they went to Japan at the beginning of the season, and that counts in that also. So if you look at it, the Mariners, A's, and Angels, all 3 of them are in the top 5 of miles traveled. 2 of those teams are going to finish under 500, and the Mariners are, kind of bucking that trend. But I think it does matter. I think it absolutely does matter. Is it the sole reason why they haven't been good enough for 20 years? No. But when we had the balanced schedule and you were playing your division opponents 70 times a year, you've replaced 20 of those matchups with a bunch of trips to the East Coast. And that definitely, it has to weigh on you, especially as you move in later and later to the season.
So part of that realignment conversation was
let me say one more thing real quick.
Sure.
Because I like this analogy and I forgot to say it. Because people think that it is excuse making, and I understand that. But if you were a football fan, I think we all recognize, every single one of us recognizes, that when your team plays on Sunday and then plays on Thursday, we recognize that that is a disadvantage, right? Now, both teams are going through it, but one team's had to travel. Your injuries are different. Thursday night football, we understand, is a disadvantage. Imagine if your football team did that 4 times in a season and played that schedule 4 times in a season. You would recognize that your football team would be at a disadvantage. I don't know that it's an exact apples to apples comparison between what the Mariners do and that, but it's one way to conceptualize just how your schedule and how it's sequenced can affect you.
Yeah, I think it's more than fair. I think it is that's a good way to conceptualize it, because if you do the ratio of what the NFL games are worth, et cetera, the travel does line up as being really a bear. I think that is the word to use for it. But before we move away from the realignment conversation, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the expansion conversation as well. And I think people have opinions on what market would be best served to have an MLB team. We know the favorites, et cetera, Nashville, potentially Portland. Taking the Mariners out of it, or maybe include your fandom in it, because I think Portland would be directly related to a natural rivalry with the Mariners. Do you have a preference? Do you have an understanding of who would be the best market? What would be the best thing for the MLB as far as what city they would occupy?
I do not. I could think about this from a Mariners perspective in that, it's interesting. Portland would bring in a natural rival, as you said. It would also kind of hurt the Mariners fan base and market coverage. And while the Mariners people will care about that from the business and revenue side, and that certainly will be a big deal with them, matters to me in that I already think the Mariners are an underrepresented fan base. I don't want any. I want the Northwest. I want the Mariners to be the Northwest team. So I would like to see Portland. I would not like to see Portland have a team in that regard, but I understand there would be a lot of benefit to it. I think you would need one West Coast team, one East Coast team. Look, I've grown up on the East Coast. I would be partial to seeing Montreal get a team again. And I know they're not going to, and I know that Charlotte is the leader in the clubhouse, and Nashville's a leader in the clubhouse, and there's all these other places that are trendy, and I get it. But Montreal, I would love to see have a team again. So if you're asking me my opinion of what I'd want, it would be Montreal, and maybe I could get down with Salt Lake City. But I don't think it might be Salt Lake City in the West, but I don't think it's going to be Montreal in the East.
It feels like one of those races where you're watching on the big jumbotron on a baseball game where someone pulls ahead and someone goes back. I feel like the buzz was on Salt Lake City for a bit. Like you mentioned, Charlotte, Nashville feels like it's always this natural favorite. I don't know. The Portland market, I understand, like you're talking about, that was the pushback when the Athletics were thinking about that stadium in San Jose, was the Giants didn't want to let up any of that ground because regionally they want to own San Jose, San Francisco, et cetera. And then pushing into your territory, that does come into play. So I think some of these fan bases, they have to give up a little bit. Because if you're in Portland, I'm sure there are some Mariner fans that do live in Portland right now.
Oh, absolutely. But, we see this. And again, that's more of a business thing, right? Like, we do see this, though. Portland and Seattle coexisted in the NBA for a long time. We see, Vancouver and Seattle now existing in the NHL. So, it happens. We get 2 teams in Chicago and 2 teams in Southern California. So, the business people will have to eat it if it comes to that. I just would like to see as many Mariners fans out there as possible. And it does get impacted when you put another team there to kind of compete with them.
So going back to the Mariners, as far as their play at home and also on the road, and right now they're on the road at Kauffman against the Royals, and they are looking to pull into an even race here, 3-2 down in the bottom of the 6th. But they've been dominant at home since the break, 23-6, but 8-17 on the road in the same span. And maybe it has to do with the travel. And you mentioned some of those attrition of these road trips. Whether the approach at the plate, bullpen usage, run prevention, what do you think needs to translate for success away from T-Mobile Park for this team to win a AL West title for the first time since 2001 and eventually have some success in the playoffs? Because if they're going to go further in October, we know they have to win at a higher rate on the road.
The rotation has to be better. Now, you could sit here and say, right, like they played good teams on the road. You look at Philly and you look at the Mets, and I know the Mets have been struggling, but you look at the Mets lineup, certainly. Soto had a big series against him. Lindor had a big series against him. Tampa at the time, while they've struggled now, when the Mariners played them, they were right in the mix in the wild card, and Caminero went off in that series. So some of it is the competition you played. I think some of it is probably the travel and kind of wearing you down, and we can make all of those excuses we want, but the rotation, bottom line, has to be better. The thing that I find interesting, though, is like, this is not just a Mariners problem. I've always said that if you want to be good, if you want to put yourself in position for a good season, you have to do 2 things. One is win at home, and the other is beat who you're supposed to beat. And if you do those 2 things, you kind of give yourself the freedom to be around 500 on the road. Now, the Mariners coming into this game on Wednesday are, they are 6 under. I wish they were even and 3 games better on the road, but they're 6 under. But you look around them, right? The other teams that are in the playoffs, Detroit is only 3 over on the road. Cleveland is 1 over on the road. Toronto is only 2 over on the road. Boston is under 500 on the road. You look at the Padres. The Padres are 6 under on the road as well. The Dodgers are 3 under. So, like, being good at home and being iffy on the road is a thing that is happening all over baseball to good teams and teams we think can win the World Series. It is not just a Mariners-specific problem. They need to get the rotation right on the road for sure, because shockingly, the offense has really not been the problem with this team for most of the year. But the road woes are something that consume well more than just them.
I know you said before you don't consider yourself the prospect guy, but I'm going to ask you about a couple of the higher profile guys, I guess I could say. Colt Emerson makes his AAA debut, homers right away, 20 years old. Do you see him factoring into the Mariners' plans as early as next year, now that he's at the AAA level, or do we think we wait a little longer?
So I think it's kind of directly related to what's happening with J.P. Crawford. J.P. Crawford is the incumbent. He's a team leader, 7 years, longest tenured Mariner at this point. But the play has regressed. He's been one of the least productive offensive players in the second half of the season. He was a Gold Glover in the COVID 2020 season. The defense has not been as good. He is under contract through next year and then is a free agent in 2027. So I would expect J.P. Crawford, given his status, given his position in the organization, in the community, and given the youth with Colt Emerson, I would expect J.P. Crawford to get a full runway to have the job in 2026. And I think it would take it really falling off the rails for them to get rid of him before the contract ends. I think it's far more likely that J.P. Crawford is just done when the contract ends at the end of next season, and Colt Emerson is potentially opening day starter in 2027. I think that is far more likely. I do think we can see Colt Emerson next year, but I wouldn't expect it to be like okay, they're going to give Crawford till the All-Star break and then it's Emerson's job. I don't think that that's going to happen. So I was crunching some numbers on this. Colt Emerson has played 34 games at AA this season. Let's say he gets another 15 at AAA through the rest of this year in the playoffs. That would be 50 games approximately between Double and Triple A. Cole Young, who the Mariners brought up in May this year, had 178 games between Double A and Triple A before they brought him up. In order for Cole Emerson to hit that number, he would have to be healthy and play nearly the whole season next year at Double A, Triple A, the combo of the two, in order to hit that number. Ben Williamson came up this year with like 110 Double A and Triple A games, but he had 3 years of college baseball in the rearview mirror also. He was older and more experienced. So I don't think the Mariners want to rush him. I don't think there's a need to rush him. I think J.P. Crawford finishes out his contract, and even if they thought the wheels came off for J.P. Crawford, I think there would be, your other kind of basic utility types that would fill in before they rush Cole Emerson. Could we see him? I think we might see him, but I don't think it's going to be in the meaningful way that fans want.
Well, you mentioned one of the other guys I was going to ask about too. So 2 other guys, youngsters, but that are here now at the major league level, Cole Young, Harry Ford.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the usage of those 2 guys so far by Dan Wilson?
So Cole Young started 71 games this year, and he got a very long runway. And I mean, he is just in a brutal stretch right now. He hasn't played much recently, but he was like 0-40 for his previous 15 games and like 0-60 for the previous 30, or maybe 140 for the previous 30. So he's the second baseman opening day in 2026. But if we're trying to play the best lineup right now, it doesn't include Cole Young. So I'm actually fine with what Dan Wilson has done. The lineup is more free when Jorge Polanco plays second base. It opens up the DH spot for them to do more creative things there. We saw Dom Canzone hit 3 home runs in Tuesday's win playing the DH spot. Why can he play DH? Because Jorge Polanco is playing second base, which can't happen if Cole Young is there. Leo Rivas is a good player, does a lot of nice things for them, so I have no problem with him playing as well. Harry Ford has everybody bent out of shape, doesn't really have me bent out of shape, and a couple of different reasons. It's very clear to me that Harry Ford is here for one reason. He is here to be late game roster flexibility. That is it. And that is how they're using him. So because I know what the plan is, I'm not offended by the usage. Some people don't like what the plan is, but I'm generally fine with it because Cal Raleigh plays every day. Whether Cal Raleigh is catching or DHing, Cal Raleigh plays every day. So we take Wednesday, for example. Cole Reagans is pitching, left-hander. Mitch Garver starts at catcher against most left-handed pitchers because he actually hits left-handed pitching very well. In the past, the Mariners have been hesitant to pinch hit for Garver late in games against right-handed relievers because they don't want to run the risk of, okay, I've taken Garver out. Well, what if Cal gets hurt? Now I have no catcher. Now with Harry Ford, they have the ability to pinch hit for Mitch Garver late in games. That is the reason he is here. So that if something were to happen to Cal, they have a catcher once they've pinch hit for Garver. And most people, not all, most people, a lot of people have a problem with Garver's general existence. And look, he has not hit well since signing here. 2 years, $24 million. He has not hit well. But he has 2 years worth of experience with this pitching staff. He's a veteran of almost a decade in Major League Baseball. We are in a playoff race. I have to take the idea that these pitchers trust him and know him, and that Dan Wilson, a former catcher, values what he does behind the plate, rather than throwing Harry Ford in to guys he doesn't know as well, that haven't worked with him as well. I don't know that that's fair to Harry Ford or to the pitching staff. Next year, we're going to see Harry Ford come in, I think, and play the Mitch Garver role. I think he'll play a lot against lefties. I think he'll spot Cal. After what Cal has done this year, maybe they'll give Cal more DH days next year. I expect Harry Ford to be a big part of 2026, but I'm not offended that he's not a big part of 2025 right now.
So we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but we know that there's a couple of postseason paths. And we know that with the new wild card format, the 2 top division winners will get the bye. And that brings to the age-old conversation where, looking at how the scenario plays out, would you rather them have nearly a week off before the ALDS, or would you rather them host a home wildcard series at T-Mobile? Because we know that some teams get cold. We've seen it in the past. If you have the time off and you don't want to give up having the bye and getting the rest. But do you see the rest of a bye or the momentum of having immediate games playing out better if you had to look into your crystal ball for the Mariners' October aspirations?
First off, I'm in favor of the Mariners getting home games. I think this fan base deserves guaranteed home games. So I'm in favor of the Mariners being in a position to get home games. That's number one. That's most important to me of anything. Number two, I think that if the Mariners are in a position to get home games, I would rather have the bye. This franchise hasn't been to the ALCS since 2001. I'm in favor of lopping off a round that you have to win in order to make yourself closer to getting to the ALCS or the World Series. I get the rest versus rust thing, and we've seen it backfire on teams. I also, look, if they win the division and get the 3 seed and end up seeing Houston as the 6 in the first round, I don't know that I want to see Hunter Brown and Framber Valdez in games 1 and 2 on the other side in a short series. I would much rather see, whether we're talking about Toronto or the Yankees, like in a 5-game series. I know they've got aces too, but seeing Hunter Brown in a guaranteed game 1 is not something I want any part of. And we're going to see it this weekend when the Mariners play the Astros, where it's Brown, Valdez, and Alexander. And I know Valdez hasn't been as good this year and hasn't been as good recently. So maybe it will work out in the Mariners' favor, but I'm in favor of not seeing Hunter Brown as often as I can.
And with the aspirations for the AL West title, a big piece of that, obviously, the Astros will play a part. The series they have coming up. We got the news yesterday, Yordan Alvarez in a boot with a crutch. He's out indefinitely. They didn't put him on the IL, but it seems like he's going to miss the remainder of the regular season. Do you believe that potentially could slam the door on Houston, or is there other offensive threats that pick up the slack? Because Alvarez has had a snake-bitten season. Devin and I use that word, but that has to be something that threatens the chances of an AL West crown for Houston, because when he's not in that lineup, they're a different team.
I mean, they are a different team. He's phenomenal. He's the most feared hitter in baseball to me from a Mariners perspective. We saw what he did in 2022 in the ALDS with the home run off Robbie Ray. He homered in game 2 off Luis Castillo and cost the Mariners a win in that one also. So, I mean, I don't want the Mariners to have success at the expense of other people's health. I don't root for that. I'd rather the Mariners beat the Astros when they're both at their best straight up and earn it. But not having Alvarez is a big deal. But I don't think it slams the door on Houston at all, because we look at it right now, the Astros are on the verge maybe of sweeping Texas without Alvarez in 2.5 of those games. And rumor has it they might get Isaac Paredes back for this series this weekend. And I know he's been out for a while with the hamstring injury, but he's there. The Mariners didn't see the Astros, or haven't seen the Astros with Carlos Correa yet since he's been back there. So, look, they've played the whole year basically without Alvarez and are going to be in a position maybe to win upwards of 88, 90 games. So it certainly makes the Astros easier to pitch to, but I don't put anything past the Astros, especially when it comes to the Mariners.
It's almost on clockwork, like Beetlejuice, Mitch Garber with a sacrifice fly to tie the game. So you said his name and he pulled through for you guys. So tie game
against
in
the
Kansas
lefty,
City,
like I said. So they let him hit.
Good stuff.
Another guy, we've mentioned his name a few times here, but let's talk about him a little more in depth. Dan Wilson, now basically a full year at the helm. How has he, in your opinion, affected the identity of this team?
So a couple of different things. I think first and foremost, the thing that fans and I lump myself in, but like fans get all bent out of shape in the micro. And I will say the biggest thing that has changed for me this year, is I'm not living in the micro as much as I did even a year ago. And I'm now able to see how players and coaches and managers are able to just go on to the next one. Like, the individual losses aren't affecting me like they did, again, even a year ago. It's something I've learned this year. I don't know that I like it, but it's something that I've learned this year. So I'm sure I can point to a bullpen decision that I questioned that didn't work out. I'm sure I can point to a pinch hitting decision that didn't work out. I'm sure I can point to a time where he should have pinch hit. Over the course of the year, I'm sure I can find 5, 10 decisions, 15 decisions. When did they bunt? Why did they bunt there? They didn't bunt there. I'm sure those things exist, and many Mariners fans will hold those things against Dan Wilson. The things that have gone well for Dan Wilson, undoubtedly to me, is that he doesn't get too high or too low, and the players like that. The players feel at ease with him, and the players feel comfortable with him. And I think it's huge bonus points that Cal Raleigh loves him, because Cal Raleigh is the leader of the team. And if Cal Raleigh likes him, then I think that filters down in a big way also. So from kind of a manager in the sense of it, right? Managing the clubhouse, managing personalities, I think guys love him. Can I point to individual decisions that I would have done differently in hindsight? Yes. But I think the first outweighs the latter in a lot of ways. And I think the one thing that I would want Dan Wilson to learn coming out of this year, and I had to learn it as well, is that I think there was a stretch late August as they're going through these road swoons where I do think the guys were tired. And one of Dan Wilson's things has been that every game matters. And as a fan, I feel that way also, right? The every win you get in April is one less win you have to get in September. And the game on May 10th on a Tuesday matters just as much as the game on August 10th on a Tuesday. But we got to a point where the Mariners had 5 players who had played more than 130 games, and no other team had more than 3. Now, Gino did a lot of that work playing for the Diamondbacks. That's not all the Mariners doing. But when you look at Julio, Cal, and Rosarena, those 3, we got to a point where guys were exhausted, I think. So I guess the thing I want Dan Wilson to learn is to trust the bench a little more next year, give guys a little more of a day off here, a day off there. And it's hard because, again, I want to win every game. And I don't enjoy when the team puts out a lineup that's not the best lineup that it can. But as now we've seen a 2-7 road trip, a 3-6 road trip where guys look like they're dragging, you're now seeing what I hope I learn and Dan Wilson learns, that your bench needs to be deep enough and trustworthy enough to play, especially early in the season.
So what shifted in your fandom to have that bigger picture view? Because I'm more reasonable as a fan now watching as well, where I'm not trying to get as high as too low. There are some situations, some losses that hit worse than others. But what shifted for you? Like, because I know that is an adjustment for some fans. Is it because you're covering the team on a daily basis, or
yes,
something different?
That's why. And it's kind of twofold. One, so I've always watched every game, right? I've always watched every game. And now that I'm covering it, and I don't cover every game in person, right? But I went to spring training for a week. I've covered probably 20 games in person. By the time the year ends, I will have been at probably 20 or so. And because I'm in it day to day, I'm able to see how they're in it day to day. That's first and foremost. And the second thing is I don't want to say access, but maybe it is access. Because I'm around the team more and I'm in the clubhouse and I'm talking to guys and I've interacted with Dan Wilson and I've interacted with guys and I see what's going on and I know the work that's happening behind the scenes, or you hear that this guy's battling a little bit of this. And the thing you don't know when you are solely watching as a fan, or you get a chance, like I've gotten a chance to ask Dan Wilson, right? Hey, you bunted in this situation in the past. You didn't butt in that same situation here. Why? And I've gotten a chance to hear his answer. And when you hear the answer, you're like, okay, look, it didn't work, but I at least got the answer as to what the rationale was. And as a fan, I think, or as a Soul fan, you walk away from the TV and you're wondering, well, why the hell did they do that? Or why did they go to that guy? Or why did they not do this? And a lot of times as a fan, I wouldn't even listen to the post game to get those answers. But now I'm staying through the post game. I'm hearing the answers, and I get to be the guy asking the question to what I want answered. And because I'm able to do that, and because I have, again, maybe access is the right word, I'm able to start to understand things a little bit differently, and it's less emotional, and I'm seeing the thought process. You don't always have to agree with it, but because you see the thought process, you're able to get where they're coming from. At least that's what's changed for me.
Yeah, and I think a big attribute in 2025 for a manager or coach, whatever sport you're watching, is accountability. And for me, the frustration on the Yankee fandom side, and Devin and I have had these conversations weekly here about the lack of accountability of the organization, of just saying that they're smarter than you, acting like they're seeing something you don't. Treat your fans, treat the reporters asking the questions with the respect. And it feels like Dan Wilson does do that for the Mariners and their fans, because he'll take accountability. He'll stand in front of the room and take this was the wrong decision. For Aaron Boone and the Yankees, I understand the marching orders at the Death Star, and there's a whole other operation going on behind the scenes where maybe Aaron Boone doesn't make the decisions that we all want him to. But the Anthony Volpe situation, the usage of Devin Williams, there was a lack of accountability and almost scoffing at the criticism. And that is so frustrating to watch as a fan, but also as an educated baseball mind, seeing this go down where they're acting like they know better than you. And sometimes they don't. Admit you're wrong. There's something about that I think a lot of front offices, a lot of teams do not connect with.
You know, it's interesting too, because I think one of the things that Mariners fans have traded, and there's a trade-off here, is that Dan Wilson is more old school. And I don't want to dance on Scott Servais getting fired because I don't think that's fair to do. But I personally grew tired of the strict adherence to kind of what you're talking about, right? The analytics stuff, with Scott Servais here. Okay, we always pinch hit in this situation. We're always going to take out our righty to put in our lefty. Even if our righty is 2 for 2 on the day, we're always going to that move. Dan Wilson plays more of the what have you done for me lately, and I'm going to ride the hot hand. And look, at times that has burned them, right? You leave on a guy who doesn't hit well against lefties to hit against a tough lefty just because he had a hit earlier in the game. I recognize that can burn you. But on the other side of the coin, we have seen more old school baseball. They run more, they play athletic more, and they don't adhere to some of those roles that we see a lot of other fan bases being forced to adhere to. And I can't always say that it's right, but it's different, and I think fans have appreciated that.
Yeah, I mean, for every analytic stat, and you can open up the binder, look at the stats, go back in other postseason moments. For every moment you can make the case for Travis Ishikawa when he hit that home run for the Giants, did anyone actually believe he was going to do that? So there is some feel and some gut, right? So
yes,
these are things that, you have to balance. And we have this conversation on a weekly basis. But moving into the bigger picture for the league, as we hit the final stretch, we talked a lot about the Mariners, but kind of focusing in on MLB at large. Give us your World Series pick. I mean, the Mariners can be in if you objectively believe they will be. Who do you think is hoisting the trophy in October, and what are the matchups representing each league?
Putting me on the spot here. I think the entire American League is flawed. So you could make a case for any of them to win it. I could make a choice for any of them to lose in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's interesting that I picked Boston to get to the World Series at the beginning of the year.
Me too.
And I think the Roman Anthony injury is a real big issue for them.
No.
And I think the starters are not quite good enough. I think I'd probably say the Yankees just because I think that bullpen, while it has been not very good in the second half at the back end, it has the potential to be the death bullpen that they want it to be. When we talk about Weaver, Williams, and Doval, you talk about Judge, Stanton, the power they have. The experience, I would probably go with the Yankees on the American League side. The National League side, I'm going to go with the Padres. It feels like they've been knocking on the door, or they were supposed to be knocking on the door for so long that this feels like the opportunity for them to do it. And the Dodgers, for whatever reason, have been much more wounded in the second half. So I would say the Padres and the Yankees, and I'll go with the Padres to win it.
1998 rematch over there, and hopefully for Padres' sake it goes better. I mean, the Yankees dominated them. It was a different time, a different place, but like you said, the AL is such a crapshoot right now, where some of these teams, and a lot of teams do small things well in the American League, like the Blue Jays field well, they have situational hitting, but there isn't that runaway team. I guess the parity is a good thing, but it also shows how much better the National League has been pretty much all year. There's a couple teams in the National League that scare the hell out of me.
Yeah, Philly, certainly. I didn't mention them, right? They certainly could win it. I think the Wheeler injury there is a huge issue, although the rotation has been so good for them, although really anchored by 3 lefties, which is interesting when you look at Luzardo, Sanchez, and Suarez, and maybe you do run into a lineup that hits lefties well, right? Like if they played San Diego and you look at it and say, okay, Machado and Tatis and these guys that are right-handed dominant, maybe they would match up well with the Phillies. But the National League is better. There's no doubt. But the American League does have the excitement of and kind of anything can happen. Like the Yankees bullpen can be great, or it can look like it's looked in the second half. Toronto's back into the bullpen. Hoffman's got 30-plus saves, and we're talking about an ERA over 5 at the last time I checked. We don't know what's going to happen with Bichette. We don't know what's going to happen with Anthony Santander there. the Mariners rotation has been Jekyll and Hyde. They've been Jekyll and Hyde on the road. So it's what makes October fun and nerve-wracking.
So Brady, we have a tradition here with our guest episodes where we like to end a lot of the guest episodes with a Mount Rushmore segment. I went back to 39. I don't believe we did it with you back then, so I guess we started it more recently. So the idea is simple here. Mount Rushmore of Seattle Mariners. And just to clarify, this does not necessarily need to be like the top 4 WAR players, like very analytical. Just in your mind, your fandom, your experience over the years with the Mariners, your Mount Rushmore of the Seattle Mariners franchise.
Ken Griffey Jr., Edgar Martinez, Randy Johnson, and Ichiro. I have a very hard time leaving Felix off the list, but as a product of the 90s, you look at the group of people that got the Mariners relevance, it was the mid-90s Mariners. So I'm going to be partial to Randy Johnson for what he did. 95, the playoffs, coming out of the bullpen, little big league, whatever it was. Randy Johnson, 95. And then, look, he went 18-2 in 97. He was there for a decade. He threw a no-hitter, helped him get to the playoffs. I think he is a foundational member of everything the Mariners have become. So I have a very difficult time leaving Felix, but if Mount Rushmore adds a 5th person, eventually we'd bring Felix in.
That might be the fastest response,
I was about
Steve,
to say the same thing
we've ever got. Just boom, 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 boom. No hemming and hawing. I'm impressed by that.
Because you asked me for my personal, if I had to go and start thinking about who was the quote best Mariner, I would have to give a little more kind of thought to Felix versus Randy. But for me personally, Randy helped put the Mariners on the map. So him, Edgar Jr. are 3. I think Ichiro's a clear 4, and Felix would be kind of just. Look, I didn't include Alvin Davis either. He's Mr. Mariner, but he's not on my list.
So you guys, as we wrap up this episode, if you're not already following Brady, you're missing out on one of the most informed and engaging voices covering the Mariners. So you can follow him on X at Refuse to Lose Pod. So he also does the work, great work over there, talking about all things Mariners throughout the season and also on Roundtable Sports. So Brady, I'll give you the platform here to hype up some of your stuff. I know I mentioned the Twitter account, the podcast, Roundtable Sports, but this is your platform to tell everybody where they can find you and what you're up to.
I will be in Houston this weekend for Mariners Astros. It will be a nerve-wracking but fun series. Roundtable Sports is a new venture that we just kind of launched, not just me, but a bunch of people with creators from all around, all 4 major sports, college sports as well. Best thing you can do to help us is listen to the podcast and join what we call our community at Roundtable Sports. It's free to join, no paywall, no subscription, but join the community. You get kind of the newsletter with our articles. You can join the conversation. Fans can put up their own content if they want to. And as the community continues to grow, we'll be doing some kind of exclusive stuff there again, all free, but we'll have some kind of some chat room kind of stuff and kind of get the conversation going that way as well.
Well, Brady, we thank you so much for hopping on here. And if the Mariners make a run, you're more than welcome to come back on and become the first ever 3-time guest. And you can do it in a short span. You don't have to go from 39 to what are we at now? 105 at this point.
Yeah.
We can go a little bit closer and stretch if you want.
You guys are impressive because booking guests is hard. I once told someone my favorite part about this business is booking guests. My least favorite part of this business is booking guests because when you're hot, there's nothing better. But when you're cold, man, it's a tough spot to be in. So the fact that you find enough people to go 60 episodes between my appearances, that's a credit to you guys. That's awesome.
No, for sure. And I think with Devin and I were discussing this last week that there was the buzz. The first 2 weeks of football took the shine away from baseball, kind of put the shadow over it a little bit. But as we move into the end of the season in October, the wild card series happening on the 30th of September, the focus is going to be solely on baseball, and maybe we'll have some more guests covering other teams. But like I said, man, if the Mariners make a run and they have an ALCS appearance in them and they get their first AL West crown since 2001, we'll have you back on here to discuss all things Mariners, preview a series, etc.
Anytime, guys. Appreciate it. A lot of fun as always.
So we'll be back in a second to wrap up the episode. All right. We want to thank Brady Farkas for coming on once again here. As I mentioned, this is the second time he's been on the show. Of course, things have changed since November 2024. And we covered a lot of ground here for the 2025 Mariners. And hopefully there's more to come for a franchise and a fan base that certainly deserves it.
No doubt about it. It's like I said earlier in the episode, I did spend some time going back and just listening to a little bit here and there of episode 39 when he came on in the offseason. And to hear the tone sounds different. He sounds just like he's less stressed, lighter. And I think part of it is because Seattle has shown what they really can do and what they can be. I remember one of the questions we asked him was like, what's the biggest reason they didn't make the playoffs last year? And he was just flat out like, because they can't hit. And you can just tell there's a different vibe in Seattle. With that being said, I said this to you before we came on the air. It's crazy that they've won 10 in a row and they're still coming into tonight. We're only a half game ahead of Houston. And then if you look at the wild card, if they fall into that, only like 2.5, maybe 3 games ahead of the teams below them there. So like there is, as a Seattle fan, that nightmare scenario of like, they're still not locked into this. Like they still have a lot of work to do.
No, the extra wild card spot gives them that breathing room where they do eventually get overtaken by the Astros. There is the safe haven of that third wild card spot, but at the same time, what they did at the trade deadline, acquiring Naylor and Suarez, there needs to be a more of got to capitalize while you're here. We discussed it earlier in the week about the other teams that are there. You want to be able to take the opportunity to contend while it's there, while the window's open, because as we discussed, mentioned over and over again, they have not won an AL West title since 2001. They've only had one appearance since 2001 in the postseason, 2022. So these don't just come around often. Teams like this, you don't get the historic stretches that Cal Raleigh is on right now. And Julio is on a tear doing what he does. Josh Naylor, there seems to be magic that's happening in the Pacific Northwest with Seattle, and they have to take advantage of it because who knows how long the gap is going to be before you have it again.
Yeah, and Brady may have been the most level-headed take I've heard anybody have about the AL MVP race. And to be a Seattle guy and be that level-head about it, I was shocked. I think one of the things that has annoyed me about that debate the most, as an outsider, I'm a Met fan, like I don't have a horse in the race. One of the things that has annoyed me the most is if these people, if their guy is Cal Raleigh, they act like Judge is like not even close. And if your guy is Judge, they're acting like Cal has no case at all. It's like the point is they both have really, really good cases. Like you have a historic stuff going on there. So his take was super level headed. And I will say on the Josh Naylor thing, you brought his name up. Out of the whole interview, I thought he just nailed the Josh Naylor point. Like he is the obvious fit in Seattle. And no matter how the rest of the season goes for them, they have to do everything they can to bring that guy back.
And it sort of saved the disappointing stint that Suarez has had for the Mariners. If Naylor wasn't the piece that they got, and I'm not saying he was a throw-in because it was a big get for them at the deadline. We were excited for them. There is the piece that Suarez has not lived up. But I think it is contagious. When Riley's having the season he's having, Julio is back. Those things are connected. I believe that those things, protection is real in the lineup. And you can make the case that these players make each other better, not to mention Randy Rosarena's having a good year, Jorge Polanco. These things are connected where, as you mentioned in episode 39, we were discussing how offensively they were largely inept for all 2024. And when you have two guys having some seasons, you pass the baton on, you get better pitches to see, and it is a situation where it makes everyone a little bit more apt to succeed. And I think that's what we're seeing in the Mariners lineup. And let's see if they can do it in October.
Yeah, I they're such a fascinating team to me. Like I could talk about them as an outsider. I really feel like I could talk about Seattle for a long time. There's so many different things to talk about. I mean, we spent maybe the first 5 minutes or so talking about Cal Raleigh. You could dedicate a whole 45 minutes to talking about Cal Raleigh with what he's done this year. So they're a fascinating team. I think they are incredibly dangerous. I did not expect Brady to pick his own team going to win the World Series. I mean, kind of like me, I stay away from that too. A little superstitious when it gets to that, even if I really believe it. But when I look at the American League, if every team that gets in, and I know this doesn't happen, but in a world where every team is fully healthy and clicking on all cylinders, I think the Mariners are the best team in the American League. Boston was my preseason, and I stuck with them at the All-Star break when we redid our picks or had the chance to do it. Boston was my team to win the whole thing. But if I'm looking at the team that I think at their best is the best, I really think it's the Mariners. The offense, when it's clicking, has plenty of scary pieces, and the pitching staff, fantastic. We talked about the back end of that bullpen being really, really good. You got to like what you see in Seattle.
Can you imagine how hyped T-Mobile is going to be for a postseason series if they're hosting either the wild card, ALDS, et cetera? If they are able to put some some energy in that ballpark, the offense gets going, I think it's going to be a really tough place to play for opposing teams. But, him mentioning the Yankees, and it's interesting because I was thinking about this because he's not the only one that has picked the Yankees to go to the World Series. And you and I obviously live in New York, listening to local radio while on the drive home, et cetera, ESPN New York or WFAN. We're so close to the struggles that the Yankees and the Mets have had this year that it's hard to imagine that the Yankees could emerge in a month from now, be in the World Series, but it is a possibility because of how full the AL is and because of how talented they are. It would be a remarkable story, not this underdog story, but it would be certainly one of those. I know they don't release DVDs for it, but a season story to discuss really what has been a marathon, a roller coaster of a season for the Yankees, the ups and downs, all the storylines, for it to end with them back in the World Series after the embarrassment that happened last year, losing to the Dodgers. That would be wild. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but from an objective point of view, for someone like Brady, who's been watching the whole league and seeing it play out, the fact that the Yankees are in contention, I guess that shows that Boone, Cashman, the whole crew over there with the steady hand and not panicking like we all were locally here. Maybe they had it right. Maybe the fans over here were too reactionary.
Who knows, man? The postseason is going to be a wild ride. It always is. We had the Diamondbacks and the Texas Rangers in the World Series a couple of years ago. No one expected that before the postseason started. So you just never know. And back to Seattle, just to wrap that up, they are, I believe, only 2 games behind Detroit for the second best record in the American League, which could get them that bye situation. So they're in such a unique spot of like, they could be the third wild card team. If things go poorly here, they could fall out of the playoffs. They could be a team with a bye and home field. Like there's a lot of ways it can go. They're up 4-3 now. So they have made the comeback in the 8th, JP Crawford with a solo shot. So if they can get this one, every win, like he was saying, every win is big, especially in the position they're in right now.
I have the score over here. They're down 5-4. It looks like over here. I'm not sure if you have the delayed score.
I just checked it like a minute and a half ago. So maybe something happened between there. Sorry.
Yeah, the Royals.
You're right.
Yeah, the Royals are up. It wasn't. The Royals just scored 2 in the bottom of the 8th here. So Brady over there, trying not to get too high or too low like his boy Dan Wilson. But if you guys want to support our show, we release 2 episodes in this week, and we try our best to give you guys the best baseball content here. You can follow us at TableSetters Pod on Twitter and also on Instagram. Devin posted the reel today about Ellie De La Cruz getting some good engagement over there. If you can be so kind, also leave a 5-star review for us. That's how other people find us in the algorithm. If you have other like-minded baseball fans out there and you're trying to engage in some conversation, leave a 5-star review. Let them know we're out there, and we're happy to engage everybody in conversation. Tweet at us, send us an Instagram DM. If you are a content creator, want to collab with us or have conversations about baseball, our DMs are always open.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The more chatter, the better. Like we've said a few times here over the last week or so, we're getting to the pressure part of the season. So there's plenty to talk about. Take your eyes off the football stuff for a little bit. There's still miles and miles to go. You're not missing that much if you take your eyes off football for a little while and then look at baseball. Baseball's getting real good right here down the stretch.
So before we say goodbye, it will be too far away from when we last talked about it. Did you see the Bananas sell out Yankee Stadium? Did you happen to watch any of those clips?
I saw a couple of them. I saw Nick Swisher appear. And a couple other clips, but I mean, mainly just the pictures of the sellout and how incredible it looked.
There's momentum building with Bananas. And I was having a conversation with someone who's not a baseball fan, actually a staunch baseball adversary, someone who believes baseball is boring. They don't like baseball. And I was trying my best to have an informed conversation with that person. And, this person didn't know the pitch clock existed, still thinking games are going 4.5 hours, which is just largely not true. You're not educating yourself. That being said, this person loves the Bananas, was heading there, loves everything they do. And I'm having a hard time conceptualizing the connection. And I understand it is fun. It's a show, but I'm having a really hard time when the games don't matter. And that was something I kept getting stuck on. He's like, it doesn't matter. It's supposed to be the show here and there. I just can't imagine engaging with a product like that. He was comparing it to a Broadway show or a movie, and I don't engage with that.
Well, you know what? We'll leave with this. I feel like we've tried a little bit. I know you've tried. I've tried actually recently to get some representation from the Savannah Bananas on TableSetters. I haven't been lucky enough to get it going yet, but we got to keep on trying that front because I would bet if we asked someone involved with Bananas, like, does the winning and losing actually matter to these players? I bet they would say something differently. And I could be completely wrong, but I feel like it'd be interesting to hear their answer on that.
For sure. And we'll keep you guys informed on that. Like we said, we're going to keep trying pounding the pavement for some guests here in October, some other fan bases that are involved, and get you guys represented. But we'll be back next week talking all things baseball as we approach the end of the season. And until that time, we will talk to you after a while.